So it's the big week, the fun week where we talk safety, child safety, confidentiality, and stuff like this. And it's a very, very necessary conversation, but it's not a fun conversation. In fact, I kind of hope that you feel a little bit creeped out in this session. That's a good thing. That's actually what we're going for here. There is a man that was a pastor on 1960 and 45, I think it was a Methodist church, just got sentenced this week to 17 years of prison for physically molesting a girl from the ages of 13 to 18 at church. And I read of another pastor last week, similar thing. I think he was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so this is a big thing, and here's what happens. We're going to talk about it today. Anyone that has a proclivity to this, to basically sex offenders, I'll just call them that for now, and we'll get into more details. They are looking for easy access to children. And where they find easy access to children is either in churches or in like Little League and baseball and things like this, where they can gain the trust of parents, they can be around kids and groom them. It's terrible. And it's something that we as a church need to be aware of, and we need to be looking for this as well. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today a bit. But before we get to all of that, I want to talk about confidentiality, because as y'all know, come on in, Brenda. Hey, Arturo. Y'all can grab, just grab, it's a whole packet there of each one. When it comes specifically, some of you guys are serving just on Wednesday nights. This won't necessarily, actually, it's for everyone. If a kid divulges information, right, especially in small group setting, one of our main rules, right, is what happens in group stays in group, this confidentiality thing. But in student ministry, that is not true. You cannot promise any kid 100% confidentiality. So we have to make them aware of this. Even the rules of the state of Texas, if a kid at all mentions that they're being harmed or that someone's harming them or anything like that, you have to report it, or you can be prosecuted would be the word, and held liable for that. And so that's why we have to go through this training every year so that you're aware of what that means, what is harm, what isn't. And so there's a lot of fine lines in this. So I'm hoping to go through that and bring some clarity to us. So getting through this, keeping in mind that students are minors, then we cannot completely be confidential if they share certain things. So we have to let them know that. So if they're like, please don't tell my parents, or please don't tell so-and-so, but I need you to know, you cannot promise that. So because we are leading minors and are responsible for their well-being, there are 3 circumstances that cannot be kept confidential, okay? Number 1, if the student is being harmed. That's primarily physically, but it could be mental as well as emotional or sexual abuse. If a child mentions they're being harmed, they're being hit, they're being, you cannot keep that confidential. You have to report it. If the student is harming themselves, so if they're talking about I cut or I'm sleeping around, we would consider a sexually active kid harming themselves. So we're going to have to walk with them through that. And their parents through what that's going to be. That is considered harm. So if a student's harming themselves and they're letting you know, and if they mention things, anything about a mention of suicide, a mention of I don't want to live anymore, things like that, that is not necessarily that they're harming themselves, but that is definitely, you've got to let us know that information. Don't keep that and try to walk with them through that. We would need to know that immediately. So if a student's being harmed, if a student's harming themselves, or if a student is harming someone else. So if they're mentioning, I got in this fight, I beat up so-and-so, or we see them hitting or abusing kids even in our student ministry, we have to take the right course of action there. So those are the 3 places, though. If they mention to you, you're talking to them in small group or on Wednesday night, they kind of pull you aside and tell you something around this nature, you have to let them know I have to report it, but usually what we do here at the Med is we want to be with you. We want to help you through this. We want to walk with you. So it's not like, good luck with telling your parents that. Wow. No. Like we want to do that with you. We want to walk with you, but also that you'll have to report it as well, and we'll get into that. Through this, the laws of the state of Texas, we are legally obligated to break confidentiality if any of these three things happen. So let's talk about what is actually harm. So we're like, if they're being harmed, if they're harming themselves or harming someone else. So what is that? Obviously, abuse, rape, assault, bullying. Now, bullying is a fine line, all right? It's a tricky one that we've dealt with. What one kid calls bullying might be that they got teased or called a name, and it's like, yeah, that's a bummer, and I want to deal with that, but that's not necessarily bullying. So with bullying, it's kind of gray, and I actually was hoping that George was here, but that's all right. When you guys, for those of you in the school district, what are y'all with bullying, like kind of what is y'all's line there? How do y'all deal with that when a kid is talking about bullying in the school system? I'm just curious. I know I'm putting y'all on the spot.
I think it's kind of ambiguous. It is gray. So
Yeah.
I think you really just have to do like a deep dive and go back and forth and have a conversation.
With what really is going on.
Is it persistent? Is it, I mean, there's things like that nature, because a name one time is not necessarily bullying.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we want to validate then that that's no good, that, man, that's really difficult. But we also, I think only in bullying do we try to investigate a bit. Other things, and I'm going to get to that, you're not the investigator. If you get information, you're not investigating it. Bullying is the one place that's gray, where it's like what's really going on? And there's legitimate bullying going on, just so you know, via text threads where they're making a kid feel terrible. We had a kid at camp this year tell another kid they should go kill themselves, and that was reported to me, and I had to deal with that. That's a legitimate, not okay. We would never do that. Major repercussions to tell another kid to go kill themselves, who also struggles just with, depression. So not great. So if a person is being harmed, let me go through it. I know y'all can read. I'm going to have to read a little bit this week though. So what constitutes harm? Abuse, rape, assault, bullying, cutting, burning, talks of suicide. Self-harm has to be reported to a parent. Sex, a parent or guardian must know if their student is putting themselves or others at risk of pregnancy, STDs, and those things. Drugs and alcohol, not only is it illegal, it's damaging to their lifelong future. So if they report some illegal activity that they are doing, we have to take steps in walking through that.
Steven,
yeah.
When it says reported to the parents, we're actually coming to you first, though, right?
Yeah. I would just say this, of all this stuff, please always keep me and or Allison in the loop, always. We'll get into other reports, but yeah, don't try to deal with any of it on your own. If there's stuff to this level and this nature, we have to know about it. You understand that, right? Like, if you're dealing with it and a parent comes to me and I don't know anything about it, not going to be great. So we really need your help. Y'all are the eyes and ears. Y'all are the ones with your students. Y'all are the ones that they're going to talk to. So just keeping us in the loop, hey, it is not gossip. What turns into gossip is when y'all all share with each other all the different things, and we got to protect that. That is not keeping things safe. But coming to us, just like we need to talk to a parent, we need to keep these things together. It is very important for us to know about it. And so keeping that with us is great. Talking with one another, just be real careful there. Sometimes it comes out like, hey, how would you deal with this if so-and-so said this to you? Because they said it to me. You just want to protect the kids in that and not let a lot of that stuff out. As you know, that stuff can turn into a massive forest fire. So bringing it to us is big. If a student is being harmed, here are your next steps. Number one, listen. If they are opening up to you, listen. They may actually tell you more if you'll just sit in it and listen and not just react in the first thing they say. Some of y'all know this with your own kids. There is a very big difference between reacting and responding. So reaction is, oh my gosh, what? It's like, shuts a kid down immediately. So please do not react when they share something with you that kind of takes you off guard. I'll just tell you that as a parent too. We're trying to work on this because it happens way more there where I'm like, wait, what? You know, like okay, don't. But responding is taking, as an adult, as the mature one, an appropriate course of action to what's been shared. Okay, here's what we need to do. And so first step is listen. Listen and believe them. A lot of times what happens is we want to investigate and go, oh, that's not really true, or that. Like, don't do that. Listen to them, hear them out, be curious. Well, tell me more about that. When did things happen? All that stuff. I know y'all can read through a little bit of that, but if a student shares information in a group setting, make sure you follow up one-on-one. If they drop a bomb in group, don't make a massive big deal out of it right there. Susie's like, yeah, me and my boyfriend have been sleeping together, and you're just like, hold it, let's talk. Be like, oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. Wow, that's got to be really difficult. Let's walk through that. You can kind of help us not dive into all of that in group. Obviously, we trust y'all on knowing what's appropriate to talk about and not. But anytime there's a pretty big thing shared in group, you're going to always want to be the leader that circles back around with them to connect with them one-on-one. So don't make the whole group about something if they drop a bomb. You guys know what to do. Always thank them for sharing, right? We always want to reward our kids in some way of being honest with us, sharing something that was difficult. I want my kid to always feel comfortable coming to me to talk to me about it first. We always make that a big deal in our family, but we want to do that in our small groups too. And so it is hard though. There are times where you just want to react what, you did what? That's usually the first response. But anyway, so listen is number one. The second one's lead. So this is, again, going into you taking action and response. When you meet with a student one-on-one, lead them through the next steps that need to be taken. If it has to do with abuse, there's a couple things we do. First off, anything related to abuse with Texas rules. It used to be a 48-hour reporting. It is now 24. You only have 1 day to have this reported. And you have to do this, or you can be held liable. If a kid tells you something like thinking about taking my life and takes their life, you could be legally responsible. So what we want to do is just always report. It is anonymous. It's not like they keep your name. You don't want to report specifically to the family on certain abuse cases, especially if it's within the family. We've had this happen where an uncle, and so we talk to parents and they don't believe it. No, there's no way. I can't. I've got to go to the Texas abuse hotline. They get to investigate. I got to stay out of it. So there are times to report to family, and there are times you just go straight to the police and to us. So this number right here, the 1-800-252-5400, that's the Texas Abuse Prevention Hotline. All leaders, just put that in your phone. Just for a show of hands, just because I'm curious, how many of you have had to report something? Just so everyone knows. We've had to do this. There's a good chance you'll have to do this at some point. A lot of times they'll be like, thank you so much. And they'll be like, no big deal. That's not a... And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just letting you know I heard this. I'm just trying to report it. So, but they have to follow up and do all of that, and you don't have to. On number 2, these numbers are all messed up.
Quick question.
Yeah.
For those of us who haven't had to do a report like that, when we come across a situation can we come to you?
Totally. We will walk you through it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to just hop on the line myself. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No problem.
I'm blessed that I have not had those situations.
For one of you that have done this before, you want to just talk through the process of what you did real quick? Anybody that could just share? Yeah, Melanie?
So when I had to do it, I actually came up here and Alice and I did it together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we did it.
We'll do it with you.
Recording it, right?
Mm-hmm.
She walked me through that.
It has to be you, because they didn't confess to us, they confessed to you. So if they say something to you about it, you have to be the one. We can't do it for you. So that's the point. But we would love to walk you through, here's what you do. It's pretty simple as far as you can do it online, you can fill out a report, but normally what we do is call. We just call and let them know. Yeah, Dorothy?
So what about parents that have, I have a daughter, right, in the room.
Uh-huh.
Somebody shares that to her and she brings it to my attention. Should we come straight to you about
Yes.
And that's already like,
Yes, you come to me about it. You come to me and Allison about it if you hear of something. Again, that's not a direct share of you. It's just that Chris learned something, may or may not be true, may or may not have been said, we don't know. So again, letting us do a little bit of the investigative work and not you. Don't be the investigator. Just report it. And in that case, it's just reporting to us. All right, so you wouldn't have to call the prevention hotline if it was like, well, this person told me this person said this. You're just letting us be aware, and then we'll kind of look into that situation. But specifically, if something is said to you, that's where you have to take action and respond.
Can I just say, so go, you win.
Is this a different number than what's been in the past?
I don't think so.
Because I had a child abuse hotline that was different. I don't know if that's from several years ago or what.
What number is it?
442-4453. And it's in here as child abuse hotline. I don't know if there's something new with Texas now or not.
This is the number we use, so I would just go with this. Now, I will say we've used different numbers for a suicide prevention line.
You've got the same as I have, so it was something that was put out.
On the last one? Okay.
He has it too in his.
Oh, okay.
National Child Abuse Hotline was one we were given in the past.
Oh, okay.
So it's this now.
I think either one will work, but this one's a Texas number. So I think that might have been a national one.
is this the APS one though?
Mm.
Adult and child?
I don't know. This is the one I was given. This is the Texas Abuse Prevention Line. So this is specific to Texas. I think that other line was a national one, and this one's Texas. So I think either one's fine. We can use either one, but yeah.
Could you share yours, Allison, and Floyd's contact information at
Oh,
some point?
yeah, totally. Yeah, most definitely.
I can find emails, but I don't have phone numbers.
You're like, I don't have your number. That's not good. You should have our numbers. Yes. I'll throw those on the group me. And again, if you don't have the group me, make sure you do, because that's where we communicate. But we'll put our personal numbers on there as well.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
Technically, as a mandatory reporter, you're not supposed to go to the parent first.
Correct.
You're supposed to go to the thing. So as a follow-up, because I've had instances where the abuse was actually taking place in home.
Yeah.
And so there's just nothing really that they need to know, that it'll figure it out and they level it and send it out. So it
Yeah.
really is an easier process. It's sad that it's an easy process as far as that it doesn't get all the emotions, but it is very almost emotionless on the other side of the phone.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fact driven, and that made it easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're just filing a report and they're just taking it from there. And yes, most of the time the abuse is internal in the home, so you would not want to bring that to a parent. You would want to bring it to them.
Just out of curiosity, for y'all, those that have had experience, do they share where the information was given from? Do they ever come back to them at church and say, is there a
No.
jail?
No, but they sometimes
They can figure it out.
Yeah.
They can.
Ask for your name.
They can.
They do take your name.
Yeah.
Your name and your phone number and contact.
Yeah, you give them your information, but yeah, they protect you as a reporter because it is, yeah. But there are times where they figure it out.
So that raises another question. So if a student does say they want to commit suicide and they actually do, and I'm told I do all this, how am I protected if the parents want to bring legal suit or something
Yep.
like that?
Any phone call to this number is documented.
Okay.
So
With
you
my name and information,
totally.
saying that I can report it.
Your name, your phone number, you will have to give. They do not give that out, but you have to give your information. So with that, you are protected. And you can also show on your own phone records that you've made a call to a number that is a prevention, So there's multiple ways that in and of itself protects
Are
you.
there any other levels of protection for volunteers? Because I can't afford to go to court. So,
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Those are other levels of protection for us if we're faced with those situations.
So anything in this regard, this is the proper way to go, and it definitely protects you. As far as liability, our church has a liability policy that's going to connect to any church-related events. So if you just have kids over at your house and it's not a Met event, then the liability from that would be on you and your own thing. But anything related to the Met, we have our own umbrella policy that protects us from liability. I am definitely not the lawyer, know all the things, but that's an overall covering for anything. Kid breaks his leg at the skate park area or on a curb. Someone falls down the stairs here, you know, we're protected under liability from that.
Court battles can be
Yeah.
very expensive, and even when you win, you still get drained.
Yeah. Yeah, we've never had that happen that I'm aware of where a volunteer is getting sued because of something they're doing in our church. But based on this, there are actual state laws specific to this that all of you need to be aware of, that you are a mandatory, you have to report it by the state of Texas. So that's why we cover this specific. On the next steps, I'm going to keep rolling. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of gray area. I'm going to try my best to help you with all your questions. But hopefully, when we get all the way through this, you'll have a good picture of what we're going for, and then we can do questions still kind of at the end. But so what I put on here: follow up with parents 24-hour. You know, the parent piece is not necessarily connected to reporting physical abuse and some of those things. Usually where we bring a parent in is based on the other ones. They are harming themselves or they are harming someone else. So in those two senses, we bring a parent usually into that to inform. Does that make sense? On the I'm being harmed, we would never report that really to a parent first, as Amanda said. We have to go straight to the hotline because could be connected to the family, unfortunately. And as you can see, number 3, inform a student ministry staff member immediately on any of this. Yep. So the third step is to leverage this information. God can use this. When we drag things from darkness to light, God brings freedom and healing. This is really good. So make sure you affirm a student. Anytime they come to you with very sensitive information, like affirm them. Thank you so much for telling me. That took so much courage, all of those things. So this will help your relationship with the student and let them know that you're there for them. And this is also why most of the time with this stuff, as the few of you that have gone through this, as you know, we walk with them through this. We help kind of walk them. So whether that's walking them to Allison and I and like, hey, we talked about this, we wanted to share with you, or we're going, you know, there's a couple other ways, but it depends on the situation. But yeah, we don't want to just leave them to it. And then the fourth one definitely is report. You have to report. According to the law, bullying does not have to be reported to the Texas Abuse Prevention Hotline. However, a conversation with a parent is needed. So that's kind of where we drew a line. Anything with bullying, we take it on and handle it ourselves by state law. We don't actually have to report bullying. And the reason is because it's so broad and it's so gray, and what's bullying, they can't, it's a hard situation. So we still want to take that conversation serious. We still want to work through it. But that is not a reportable, if a kid reports that they're being bullied, you don't have to call this number is what that means. You still need to make us aware of it, and we want to walk through that. Does that make sense? Okay. You need to let the student know that you have to report it. And so, again, letting them understand why that you do that and how that works is a piece of it. Again, the Texas Abuse Hotline number is there, and so is the address. All right. So, yeah.
It says that tightens up the timeline which they should tell their parents. We're not talking about, you tell them I have to report this, but if it's happening in the home, they do not need to say anything.
So what this is referring to specifically, this is where this mostly what we're talking about. If a student is doing drugs and tells you, hey, listen, I have to report this, and with a drug-related thing, I'm making the parents aware. By the fact that I have to, within 24 hours, let a parent know, they know the cat's out of the bag, and our first form of action is always we want you to tell your parents, just like you told me, and I'll be happy to do that with you. I'll walk with you. I'll stand there, but they're gonna know in the next 24 hours. Will you tell them, or do I have to? And so that's just what that's referring to with things like that. Does that make sense? Obviously, this is covering like a lot of topics, and so there is some of this where you're like, okay, that isn't okay. If a kid's doing a lot of drugs and all of this, or in a situation like that, that's not something that we're trying to keep from parents.
This is the harming themselves or others.
Yes, correct. They are harming themselves. We want a parent to know. Obviously, anything related to them being beaten, abused, whatever, that's where we go. We go to this first. So is that clear? Okay. So now we're going to get into child abuse. And the reason we do this is we want you all to be very aware of this, that this not only happens, but like churches are targeted, and we need your help paying attention. I'm not going to say I'm looking at all of y'all like predators, but there's actually something good to that, of all of us not being suspicious of one another, but paying attention, okay? Because you just never know, y'all. I'm telling you, we did a training for our staff, which is a lot more in depth, and the people and the pictures they're showing us all, and I mean, they look like all of us. They do not look weird. They look very straight up normal. They're actually very nice and loving to students. It's really difficult, but I need us to get into this and just to be aware. So here's what sexual child abuse is. There's two categories. One is physical contact. That's what we think of anyway, but physical contact, sexual, or any kind of contact with a kid. But there's also non-contact, which we can get into some of that, but sharing photos, things like that, any kind of sexual interaction, talking about things, that is also child sexual abuse. Child abuse is any intentional action by an adult or by another child that harms or threatens a child's physical, mental, or emotional health. Abuse by another child can be older or stronger individual who exerts his or her position of power. So there is also abuse within older and younger kids. It's one of the reasons why we try somewhat to have middle school and high school separate, because it is a difficult thing, and I don't think it's that appropriate to have a 7th grader with a bunch of 12th graders all the time. We want to separate that a bit when we can. Neglect is another form of abuse that occurs when a caregiver fails to provide basic needs like food, water, supervision, medical care, clothing, all of that. So neglect is kind of in a separate category, but is also something we are gonna, and we'll talk about what we're looking for. Emotional abuse occurs when words or actions are used to cause extreme emotional pain. Often there's no visible injury. According to the U.S. Department of Health, there were over 678,000 victims of child abuse and neglect, and over 47,000 unique cases of sexual abuse. 1,770 children died from abuse. And I believe that was in the last, I think it was like 5 years is actually the time frame of that. Roughly 90% of child abuse cases involve someone they know and trust. 90% is someone they know and trust. Juveniles who commit sex offenses against other children are more likely than adult sex offenders to offend in groups and at school, and to have more male victims and younger victims. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported that 1 out of every 417 persons in the U.S. is on the sex offender registry. 42% of girls that experience their first completed rape do so before 18. So that is our group. 29.9% are between 11 and 17 years old. 12.3% are before 10. 1 in 7 girls and 1 in 25 boys will be sexually assaulted by the time they reach 18. Sexual abuse occurs in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic classes and is no respecter of any religious denomination or creed. It's widespread. It's terrible. Victim behavioral characteristics, physical signs and behaviors. So these are things we look for in victims, that this might say there's something more going on in this kid's life. If they are always wearing torn, stained, or bloody underclothing, like if you see any of that, there may be an issue. A child contracting a sexually transmitted disease or experiencing pain, swelling, bleeding, discharge, obviously probably not something that we will ever be aware of, but there are other ones that we will. Pregnancy, obviously, is a physical sign of sexual abuse in a female child. Frequent or unexplained sore throat, stomachache, headaches, or urinary tract infections. Here are some other indications that a child may be sexually abused. You can read these, but this is kind of what we look for. A child who avoids undressing or wears extra layers of clothing, not wanting to be left alone with previous trusted caregivers, exhibiting an unusual change in bathing or grooming practices, a sudden drop in grades or lack of interest in school where they were previously interested, like their personality shifts like pretty substantially. Then we're kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Exhibiting adult-like sexual behavior and knowledge, role-playing, sex activities, toys, all that. So like if they talk, like they know what they're talking about, that's a red flag. Like, how do you know about these things? Now, we also know that kids are getting older, younger, because of social media and all the things. Most of our 7th graders and up already know a lot of terms that even we aren't familiar with what that term means. So get it. But you can kind of read through this. One of the things that we just are looking for is a change in personality with kids when they get very isolating, and that's out of the norm. There's obviously kids that are quiet and kind of to themselves, but if a kid, generally in your group, if a kid stops coming, if a kid gets real isolated, not opened up, quiet, there may be something going on, and you don't want to try to pry it out of them. You just want to be curious. Hey, what's going on in you? You don't seem like yourself. We want to help get those things out. If there is a kid that's experiencing this, they rarely want to talk about it. They always think it's their fault, or they've been, most abuse victims have either been told that they're the one, it's their fault, they enjoyed it, so it's on them, that's been said, or they are threatened. I will kill you and your family if you say anything about this, and they believe it. So it's a very difficult thing, but it's something that we want to walk them through and be the safe place for kids if they're going through this to talk to them about. But yeah, most of the time what we're looking for are mood swings. Kids that hang out with adults a lot is kind of a little bit of a flag. Doesn't always mean it, but and then that gets me to adults. Adults that only hang out with kids all the time is another flag on the other side. So let's get into that. Characteristics of a child molester. So the first one, a pedophile, is a term just for an adult that is attracted to children sexually, receives gratification by their actions. They often seduce children with attention, gifts, and a pattern called grooming, which we'll talk about. Then there's a sexual aggressor. This is not necessarily a pedophile. It's someone who desires to exercise power over a victim for some deep-seated psychological reason, and usually involves rape. Not necessarily that it has to be a child, but some sexual aggressors, it will be with children. And then a profiteer. We're the #1 sex trafficking city in America. Houston is, so that's great. Glad to move my family here. Just pray for protection, but still, it's a reality. So profiteering, people who profit from child pornography or child prostitution. While this group may also include members of the above, the primary motivation is financial. So how do predators choose their victims? A preferential offender generally has an age, sex, and body type of choice. They actually have a profile of a kid that they are attracted to. They will choose recreational activities and work situations that will place them near children with that age and that range to gain trust. That's what they're trying to do. Many child molesters are very sensitive to the needs and desires of children. They may tend to choose children who feel different or set apart, such as a child who is shy, loner, from a single family home, or needy. Quite honestly, they're going after the kids on the outskirts. So we got to pay attention. Once a molester singles out a child as a potential victim, they spend extra time and attention with that child, exploring boundaries and gaining a child's trust. This is grooming. So grooming is the process by which molesters seduce children with special attention and gifts. Grooming is a process by which molesters often seduce children with special attention and gifts. The predator will participate in kid activities and try to volunteer for unsupervised activities with one or more children. Many times an abuser is well liked and may work hard to win the trust of the child's gatekeepers. That's parents, ministers, coaches. That's us. Many times a predator buys gifts for their victims, such as toys or video games, or perhaps forbidden items like liquor, beer, cigarettes, or inappropriate videos. A predator may engage in electronic communication with their victims, continuing the pattern of desensitizing them to sexual aggression. A lot of times they start introducing sexual things to a kid. Hey, I just want to talk to you about this. Don't know if you know about these things, and is desensitizing them to anything related to sex. During nap time or in babysitting, a predator may want to fall asleep with children or go to sleep in their bed. Obviously, we wouldn't have that here except for on trips and stuff where we are in quarters with kids. We want to be careful. Not that we are that, but that we are careful. So even when you're like, hey, there's a girl in my group that I love and she needs a new phone and I want to buy her a phone. Again, like buying gifts for kids in your group is a bad idea, all right? So just be aware of that because it can connect to some of these things and we will probably misinterpret it. Even if you are just trying to be generous and nice, we will probably be asking you about it if we hear of any kind of special gifts given to kids. So just be careful. In playtime or sporting environments, an abuser will engage in appropriate roughhousing, butt slapping, or touching, and then treat it as a game or like it's a normal part of sports activity, which is never acceptable. All right? So now we feel really gross, right? Like this is terrible, but let's talk about what we do here as a team, as a church, to make our kids safe. And as you can see why this training is not fun, but is so important, because we want every one of your kids to be safe. I want my kids to be safe here. So we're gonna all work together. But the way that we protect our kids here at the Met is we provide comprehensive background checks for anyone. That's why you're getting hit up with a background check. Sorry, we're gonna do that. Any child abuse or sex offender registered, it's gonna light up like a Christmas tree. They cannot serve in our ministry. They can serve other places. They cannot serve anywhere near kids or students. We require a written application and interview with most. I know some of you been kind of grandfathered in, but we're trying to work on that process a little bit more on who we're bringing in, especially at high-level volunteer roles like y'all are in. We actually check y'all's online social media profiles usually. We actually stalk you to see what you're like, just so you know. And by the way, your kids do that too. So be careful like what you're actually posting. Make sure that is above reproach because your kids are watching, the students in your ministry. And then we provide rules and guidelines for your safety, and that's what I want to go over. So first, we want to avoid false allegations. At my previous church, we had a day school. One of the janitors was in a bathroom cleaning it during hours with kids, came out. A kid said that he touched him. We have no cameras. We have no way. He's guilty until proven innocent. Like, you just got to take a leave of absence. A kid said you touched him in a bathroom. We're going to have to err on the side of the kid, even if it was a lie. So here's what that means for us. To avoid false allegations, we have to set limits on our physical and relational interactions. It's why all of you are paired in twos, or one of the reasons, not the only reason, but always being in twos. And I would say it's a little different here in church hours. If you use a regular restroom and there's a lot of kids in there, that's fine. Just, again, be careful in restrooms and unsupervised places. You might have another adult make sure someone else is in there. I've actually, there's been times where I've opened the door and it was like 5 kids and me, and I just went somewhere else. I'm serious. Be smart about it. Don't be in places like that. I know it sounds so over the top, but it's real. So we don't want to be in rooms with the doors shut with just a kid by ourselves ever. We do not take kids home in our cars by ourselves. Now, some of you, that's happened, right? You're like, wait, I've done that. I've given rides. What we've talked about is this. When it comes to cars and stuff, like giving a ride, we want to have more than one. So having multiple kids is better than a kid. And if you do give a ride, what we ask is that you actually have some sort of written consent from a parent. Hey, so-and-so and so-and-so need a ride home. Are you okay if I give them a ride? If you have written consent, it helps with not showing that you're doing something in the dark, like, oh, I'm gonna give them rides and stuff. Again, the car thing is kind of a gray area that we've walked through with some of you, like, hey, so-and-so just, can I like pick them up? I'm again just saying, to avoid false allegations, don't ever be alone with a kid, and that includes your car, all right?
Texting is good for the written?
Texting is fine, text and email. I've got a written thing where the parent gave me permission to give them a ride. We've had that problem at the mix when a kid's like, it's one kid by themselves. Now, normally, for a few of you that I know I've given your kid a ride. And I'm like, are you okay with this? But I'm still not gonna, even though I know you, I'm not gonna do that just without you knowing and like saying, yes, that'd be great. I'm like, I've given Chloe and Claire a ride home. Like they live right down the street from me. Still, hey Matt, Jen, is it all right if I give them a ride? I'll bring them home if you're okay with it. So we want to avoid false allegations, so don't really avoid ever being alone with a kid. When you have a host home, showing up to that host home, luckily there are hosts at that home, so if one kid shows up, you're still okay. Again, that's what we're trying to do. We just want to avoid it. If your co-leader is not available on a Sunday morning or whenever you're doing this, what we want to do is make sure you're not in a private location. A lot of our rooms have windows on purpose. They've told us to actually have the door cracked as well. I don't really enforce that, I'm not gonna lie, but it might be a good idea if you're by yourself with kids to crack the door, leave it to, like, just being aware. Does that all make sense? I know some of it's gray, but just be smart. Like I said, had a guy lose his job over just an allegation that we could neither prove or disprove. Avoid unmonitored and unsupervised situations. So I just covered that, sorry. Yeah, just avoid it. If there's a place where you're alone with a kid, like get away. You can meet with a kid, like say you have a 10th grader, 11th grader, they're really wanting to talk. Hey, can we meet at Starbucks? Hey, can we meet here? Like it's okay to do that if you're in a public place, all right? But just come over to my house, it's just me, and let's talk. Terrible idea, don't do that. Yeah, don't have a student in your home alone ever. Actually, we will probably ask you not to serve here anymore if we find that out. That's a big deal. That creates a lot of liability. Okay. Finally, watch for grooming behaviors from other adults. I know this isn't the fun one, but we need you to have eyes and ears. We're holding up the standard so that if there is any potential predator, they're gonna bail. They're gonna come in, get the lay of the land of here. Oh, you need a background check. Oh, they're gonna bail. It's good. It sounds terrible, but it's like go somewhere else where it's not as easy to get in and serve. But we're gonna watch for grooming behaviors from other adults. Acceptable forms of physical contact are side hugs, high fives, pat on the upper back. Just be careful with how you interact physically with a kid. We have to cover this in kids ministry with sitting in laps and stuff. It's a difficult thing. With a little child, it's okay to hold their hand, take them places. Obviously not okay when you get to our level and grade to ever hold a kid's hand. Don't do that. Don't physically discipline a kid. That is not okay, even if they deserve a swift punch in the throat. Talking to you, 7th grade leaders. I'm just joking. Rusty and Chase. All right, guys, let them beat up on each other. You don't do it. No.
Kick his tail. I don't care who you are. Sam Easton's gonna get it.
And then on the grooming behaviors, watch for another adult giving special attention to a specific kid all the time with gifts or cash and things like that. Obviously, we have kids in our ministry that we're going after. I get it. That's okay. Like, this kid needs Jesus, needs love. Don't feel like you can't have special attention in that way to a kid. What we're talking about is gifts, always spending time with one kid. You can spend a lot of time with a certain kid that has a lot of need, but we want to be careful, all right? So just again, and then, yeah, pretty much there on that. So the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, the CAPTA, whatever, it requires every state to have provisions and procedures for requiring certain individuals to report known or suspected instances of child abuse and neglect. So this is just a re-up again from what we've already talked about to reiterate. And the other form that y'all have is the one that you have to sign. It says staff, but it's for volunteers too. And I know it says staff, but this, the Met Abuse Reporting Policy, feel free to read through it. I've covered most things. But if you are serving in our ministry, you have to sign this, which says I know our policy on reporting, that I'm a mandatory reporter, that I have to report within 24 hours, and I'm going to follow through with that. On the top, it does say 48 hours. That has been changed. So I'm sorry, but we only need the last page anyway. We'll adjust the front reading.
I didn't get that last page on that second.
Yeah, man.
It's the 22nd.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, what about those last two things?
You are not the, you are the.
Yeah.
What part? I'm sorry.
Last page.
Sorry, yes, I'll get to that. I'm so sorry. You are not the investigator. You are the reporter. Do not investigate it, just report it. Obviously, again, there are certain instances that require a little investigation with bullying and things like that we will walk through, but you're always more on the safe side to simply report. So yeah, you're not the investigator, you're the reporter. So I believe I've gone over most of the stuff in this. Let me look real quick, see if I missed anything. What I will say on the first page, it does reiterate that the ministry leader or HR, like the folks at the church, the Met, we can and will notify parents in the right situations if we need to, so you don't have to feel like you have to do that part. Again, relationally speaking, it's good for you to walk with your student through that, but we will definitely follow up with parents where needed. So number 1 of the policy, any allegation must be reported. Number 2, ministry leader will notify parents or guardians. Number 3, the ministry leader, that's us, the staff, will make a dual report with the reporter or witness with the Texas Department of Family Protective Services. So we usually go in and sign underneath you guys when y'all do report stuff. That's why Allison and I usually do it with you. If the accused is a staff member of the Met, they will be relieved of their duties, put on administrative leave. Of course, this is kind of going with staff that y'all don't have to know, but if you see anything in me, Allison, Floyd, any of the staff, you still would want to report. Please report it. If the accused is a volunteer of the Met, they will be removed from serving until an investigation is completed. So if you are accused of something, just so you know, you will instantly be relieved of duty until we can figure things out, even if you're innocent. We can't afford to just be like, okay, it's fine. If that happens, what we will do, obviously, is try our best to protect you in the situation and complete an investigation on anything. But just know, like, we will ask you to stop serving for a season until we figure that out. That's not happened. We haven't had to do that yet here, which is good. So let's see. If the accused is a staff member or volunteer of the Met, they will only be addressed regarding the accusation by the ministry leader or human resources. All details, interviews, information will remain confidential to those legitimately involved in the investigation. Any individual or group responsible for a breach of this confidentiality is subject to disciplinary actions and termination. It has a little bit more to do with the staff than y'all. So the final page just kind of says how to report. When reporting to legal authorities, it's crucial that you provide as many details as possible about the alleged abuse or neglect, as well as family demographics, so that the intake specialist can make an accurate assessment of the situation. So what I want to say on this real quick is, if something is reported to you, if a kid is opening up to you, stay in that conversation. Try to get details, try to be curious. Don't be like, why did that happen? What? Like, don't be defensive in what it, but just like, can you tell me more about this? Can you help me understand? Like, stay curious so that you can get details. Those details are very important in an actual investigation. You're not investigating, but you're trying to get as much information as you can, you know.
And I've always been told not to try to take notes, because then they will sometimes shut down. So you get as many details, and as soon as they're out of your presence, you just start writing everything that you can think of that they said down.
Yeah, so obviously we need the name and address of the child. Generally speaking, if they're in our ministry, we have their address. We should, unless they're a first-time visitor and it's their first time in our group. But even that, we have cards, so we should have their address. But we do want to know who the violator is, if they'll open up about it. If they're real general, it doesn't help us that much. We still have to report it even if they're general. But we're trying to get names of persons involved. But yeah, that's pretty much our whole policy. I know that there's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of things about this that aren't perfectly clear. So your best case is to respond immediately when something like this happens by letting Alice and I know. If you respond immediately, we then have plenty of time still to make a call to the abuse hotline. We can walk you through that. So it's your best case is just any of these things. Even if you're like, that didn't seem like a big deal, tell us anyway. Like, err on that side. Alice and I hold a ton of information that y'all have no clue about, and we do that on purpose. Like, to be in ministry, you have to be very discreet, and you have to protect information wherever you can, and we will do that. So don't worry about things getting out. That's a very, very big deal to our staff and team. So just err on that side of letting us know. I mean, even like, I don't remember when it was, a couple years ago, a girl had a vape pen in her bag, and she said it wasn't hers. And I don't know how it was found, but she was going through a bag and that was in there. She forgot it was in there. The leader was like, you can't have that here. And she's like, well, it's not mine. This is my brother's bag. I didn't know it was in there. So the leader can go, yeah, you're not using it. So it's not a big deal. Just leave it. No. Like, instant call to us. We have to deal with it. So, even things like that I don't know if that seems like a big deal to you or not, but just err on the side of letting us know. Yeah, Dorothy.
Another thing that we've heard or seen a lot of research on is having double accounts in your social media, like to Instagram. That's another way of grooming as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not something that we can totally like police. Those.
Here, like I'm bringing it up because our kids talk and
Yeah.
kind of thing, and if they share that they have a secret,
Yeah.
you overhear them say, "Well, I
Yeah.
have a secret account."
Right.
That's a red flag.
Yeah. Pastor Stephen, have you seen his extra account that he's got over here? Like, that would be like, what in the world? Don't worry, I don't have a secret social account, but that would be a great example. Yeah. So-and-so pastor has a secret Instagram account that we're all sharing, gotta figure that out.
Well, but even if we find that the students have 2 accounts, that would be something that we would also want to bring you.
Yeah, you don't have to bring that. That's not,
Students have 2 accounts.
yeah.
They have a fake Insta and an Insta. It's a fake.
You don't have to bring that to me. Again, the things that you're wanting to like your antennas are up are about harm. The things that you need to report are suspected harm of themselves, of someone harming them, or they're harming someone else. Those are all the things, and that umbrella is what you're bringing to me. Kids are going to do dumb things, lie. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. You don't have to bring all those things to us. You can deal with it as a trusted leader, but specific to harm is where we got to respond. Does that make sense? Yeah, Kevin?
Say, for example, a student comes up to you and tells you, hey, my such and such parent is abusing my other mom. Say dad is beating mom or such and such. You know, it's not me personally, but my little sister, my little brother's being abused, whether it's physically, emotionally, whatever, all this type of stuff. Or even to go further is my aunt or uncle is very abusive for our cousin. It's not in the same household.
Yeah.
Does that stuff like that have to be reported?
Yes.
You know? Okay.
Yes, it does.
All that
If someone opens up to you about that, then you've got to go down that road.
So if you say, hey, you know, my cousin told me that, you know, his dad, you know, not necessarily, you know, physically abused him, but he's always, like, you know, emotional abuse.
So, yeah, again, this is a gray area. What I would say is we would want to respond in that situation. If it is specifically that, hey, my cousin who lives in Austin, his uncle's like beating him. To be quite honest, we don't have any ability. We're too far removed to even you could report it if you've got details. But everything that we're kind of talking about is specific to this situation. But if it is, I will say this, if it is a student telling you that dad's beating mom, I would say, let's report it, absolutely. Oh yeah, that is harm for the kid.
Technically, that is considered outcry, and that's considered outcry to him.
Yeah. Now, if it's my second, third cousins, like it does get like, I don't know. And what I would do in that situation is tell him, could you report it? I would be like, hey, I'm gonna give you this number. Can I walk with you through reporting your cousin's uncle beating your cousin that lives in Alaska? I don't know, you know what I mean? But if it's like that, it is difficult, but you can still walk a kid through it. Like, hey, if you know this to be true, and you're the first party, you're the initial, you know, it's not told to you, handed down, you're like, then you get the kid to help you report that. Any other questions? Yeah, John?
Just one comment. When I talk about rules and we get to confidentiality, I always give them the exceptions. And I think it's important they understand it's about protection, not punishment, and that's the reason those exceptions are there. I think it helps with the environment and openness.
Yeah. So what is a way when we hit, because I think you bring that up, what's a way that some of you that have done this, y'all talk about it? Like if you're talking to your group right now, hey, let's go over ground rules, and they say confidentiality in group, and you say yes, but how do you talk about it?
We have started saying exactly what y'all have said, because especially having gone through a high school group, because the high schoolers are going to expect the confidentiality to be different than the middle schoolers
Yeah.
are, period. The middle schoolers kind of know if they open their mouth, anybody can hear what they're saying. And we just tell them, and we label the 3 ways.
Unless it's harm of self, someone's harming you, or you're harming someone else, everything is confidential.
And we talk a lot about the drug aspect of that because they don't think it's harming themselves. So we just start laying the foundation. We had them as 6th graders, and we just say in their 8th, that includes doing something that's illegal. Drugs are illegal.
In our group, we have pushed very much what's illegal, because
Yeah.
that kind of takes it off of us.
Yep, that's
Even
right.
in our own houses, we both have done that with our kids, that I don't care what anybody else is doing, what society says acceptable, it's illegal. So
Yeah.
vaping, it's illegal.
Yep.
Because that, more than the drugs and stuff, they're gonna think that's acceptable.
I think that's not a big deal, but it's illegal. I actually have to report that.
It's
So,
illegal.
yep.
I would say we notice they're like, you know, what are the guidelines? Confidentiality. They like run through them.
Yeah.
So I think with that we've like stop. What does that mean? And we say like, 1, do you trust your sisters and brothers in this room? 2, like what does it mean? we elaborate more so than no cell phones when talking, no interrupting, I statements, cause they'll just run through guidelines.
Yeah.
like The kids that have been there multiple years.
Yep.
So I think we kind of stop on that one.
Kind of reiterate it.
Reiterate it.
Well, and here's the thing. I know some of you guys feel this way with the guidelines. Like, we do them every week. It's not a big deal. Listen, you go over the guidelines every week. Every week. And here's why. You need to hold to them. We don't just say them so that we can move on. We're trying to create a safe environment. Man, and if they're cross-talking, it's not safe. If no one trusts that girl, because she's going to say stuff I'm not sharing, you got to deal with that as a leader. You got to sniff that out and be like, hey, listen, girls don't want to share in here because you've been this way. You need to own that and tell them you're sorry, and we got to move on because they don't feel like there's confidentiality in this group, and that's not okay. So there are places where as leaders we have to lead into that, but if you don't go over the ground rules, you can't hold them to them. You know, I watched it happen a lot at Breakfast Club because we haven't really, you know, we get into all the things at Breakfast Club and they get on, and I mean, they're just running amok in there, and I'm like, you can't even call them out on the ground rules because you didn't ever actually go over them to be like, hey, let's use I statements. Hey, let's let everyone have a chance to share. Hey, no phones, you know, all that stuff. So I know that even ground rules feel at times very monotonous, like, oh, let's go over it again, but like they matter. And the moment you start calling a kid out, oh, I statements, oh, no crosstalk, remember, that is your job. Y'all, you do need to do that. And they start, okay, there are rules and they're important. So that's great. Any other last thoughts? I know I've kept you about 5 minutes over, but any other things? I know this is a very, very important conversation. All right. If you haven't completed a background check, we had an issue. I'm just going to tell you. We realized we got like quadruple charged for our background checks, like almost $1,000 overcharged on all of our background checks. I think it's even more than that. And we're having an issue with that company, and we're trying to figure that out. Either way, we've got to get the background checks done. So just be gracious with us if you get another email for it or something. We're having to sort that out. So we're figuring it out, but hopefully we have all of yours. If I don't have a background check from you, either me, Sarah, or Holly will probably be letting you know, like, hey, we need one more. And if you're like, wait, I already did that, just be gracious with us. If we're reaching out to you, we still need that. So.
Yeah, I don't really need to have mine.
Is it yearly, annually?
It is annually, but a lot of y'all have like done it. Like you did it in November, so you would be getting another one like in November. I asked them, can we re-up my whole team like at the same time? Because we're doing this now every year. It used to be every 2 years, but we're trying to be above reproach and every year just re-upping on this. It doesn't cost us much to have y'all sign a form every year and to do one more background check, unless they quadruple charge us. But you know what I mean. So yeah, so if you're needing one and if you haven't received anything, it means you're good and we don't need it. But for the majority of you, it would come probably from Holly or Sarah because they're helping us with that in the midst of all the things we're trying to launch right now. Again, I'll go back to the admin conversation from earlier. If any of y'all want to serve as an admin and help us, these are the things that can fall through the cracks. But hey, thank y'all for being here.